Today I will take a look at this Skynetic Sbach 342 then from Motion RC. It is a around 900mm wingspan RC airplane, and it's quite complicated to build this one because there are a lot of glue and you don't have an instructional manual included, so you more or less have to watch the video then that Motion RC has done for this RC airplane. But I will just show you then how I assemble this RC airplane, because there are just a lot of steps, so be patient and watch how I put this one together. On the rear stabilizer you have these pre-cut holes where you put in these carbon fiber reinforcements. And then I used CA glue to keep them in place. I'm just going around the edge of the carbon fiber rod all the way on both sides, just to have them stay put. I don't think I have to use that much glue, but just to be sure, I just want to make a good job. On the rudder piece then you have these carbon fiber rods. As you can see, I mean the paint does scrape off, so it's not a really good thing. So you have these two pieces then. Then I need to have some CA glue just to keep them in place, just as I did on the rear stabilizer. I decided to put together the motor pieces then while the glue dried on these two pieces. So there is this motor mount, you have 4 screws. And then just to make sure that this will stay put, I took some CA glue and just have a dab of glue on all of these screws, just to be sure that they wouldn't come loose. Then there's one plywood piece to mount the motor. This plywood piece goes into the fuselage, but I decided to mount the motor to this plywood piece first, just to make it easier. So you use 4 screws to secure the motor mount then to this plywood piece. And just as I did with the motor mount, I used a dab of glue just to keep these screws in place and avoid them to vibrate. On the fuselage then you have these pre-cut grooves where you put the carbon fiber rods. So you have to remove these, which takes a little bit of time. I wish that this would have been done out of the box, but I guess this was one of the most time-consuming parts of this build. When these are done, then you have this middle piece, plywood piece reinforcement. And then I used hot glue inside of the groove just to keep the carbon fiber rods in place. And then just slide in the carbon fiber rod all the way. So there are 2 on each side. And just keep pressure for a few seconds to get it to settle in. Then some CA glue on the outside then to hold them in place. Just have CA glue all along the edge. And the same thing then on the other side, just to make sure that these rods won't come out of place. Same thing then on the upper rod, so a lot of hot glue, and then putting this one in and just make sure that it does fit into the plywood pieces. Goes all the way to the front, and just keep pressure then for a little bit. Then it's the same as with the lower spar, then just use some CA glue to secure this rod. Now it's time for the motor mount then, and I already cut out a little bit of foam just to have the motor cables go in. So I put this plywood piece then all the way in so that it reaches the carbon fiber rods then on the other side. Just make sure that it's even and that it go all the way to these two carbon fiber rods. Just making sure that it's securely mounted. And then, as with the first side, then hot glue to keep these spars in place. All the way to the motor mount, and then just pressing them into the groove. And CA glue, just as with the other spars, then to keep this one in place. Same thing on the upper rod, then on the fuselage. The rod is in the groove all the way to the front. And then in the end, just keep pressure for a few seconds. And then some CA glue to keep this one in place. So as you can see, there are a lot of glue places on this RC airplane. You have to let the glue dry, so it takes quite a bit of time to do just have everything mounted on this RC airplane. As far as the motor cables, then I pre-cut a groove with a scalpel, so you have the groove. It goes down to the place then for the speed controller. So shove all these cables inside of the foam. And to keep them in place, I'm using hot glue. When I'm done with this, I just scrape off the excess glue. It's time to mount the battery plate then. So I use some CA glue onto this plywood piece. I have already mounted the Velcro strap. So I put this one in place. And I discovered that I had to use a clamp just to make this one stick. So letting it rest for a bit. Then it's time to cut the grooves for the servo cables. So this is one of the wings then, wing halves. Just using this ruler and a scalpel to make this groove. And then using a screwdriver to widen the groove just a bit. It is a little bit fiddly just to get the cables inside this groove. But if you're patient, it won't take more than maybe 1 or 2 minutes for each side. And then when you're done with that, you just have to put the servo inside of this plywood frame then. And then get it inside this pre-cut hole. So that was one side then on the wing. Then I have used some CA glue to keep this in place. Glue on all sides just to make sure. And keep pressure for a few seconds. Same thing then on the other side. So to put these cables in is a little bit fiddly, but not really too bad. I'm keeping gloves on just to avoid having CA glue on my fingers, because I don't think it's a good thing to have CA glue on your fingers. And then the same thing as on the other side, using some CA glue to secure this plywood plate then to the wing. As far as the other servo cables, you have to cut grooves for them as well into the fuselage. Same procedure as on the wing then. I had to make like this angle to have the cables run in a good and efficient way. Using a screwdriver just to widen the hole a bit. Then pushing the servo into the servo pit and start to line this cable, which just takes a bit of time. As you can see, there are a lot of steps to assemble this RC airplane, so it's just far away from a BNF or PNF version. Same thing, and then on this servo I use CA glue to keep it in place. And then for the speed controller, I hooked up the receiver and just checked so that the motor spins in the right way. And then I just put the cables together and squeezed this one inside of the hole for the speed controller. So that's pretty much it. And I have to make a groove then for the speed controller cable that goes to the receiver. Same procedure here, I'm just using a scalpel. And using a screwdriver just to help me put in the cable inside of this groove. So I'm showing in the order I did this, and I did it because I did want to have the glue then for certain parts just to dry before I proceeded to the next part. So here I have cutting the groove then for another servo, just using the screwdriver to widen the hole. And making the groove all the way to the receiver pit. In this RC airplane I opted to go for a Spektrum AR630 receiver. And put the cable in, a little bit time consuming, but hopefully only done once. And then some CA glue to hold this plywood piece then for the servo. These 4 pieces then are for the landing gear mounting point. So they are supposed to be put together like this. And to make them stay together, I decided to do this in like 2 steps. So first I put these 4 pieces together then using CA glue. So that's the first piece then. And the landing gears do go between these 2 square pieces. So more CA glue. And then putting this one in, and between these 2 goes the landing gears then. Just to have these pieces dry, I put a plastic piece underneath to avoid the glue to get on the table. And then more CA glue to attach the other piece then. So put this one all the way in. A bit of pressure, and then just to be sure, just put another drop or so of CA glue on the outside and let it dry. In the meantime, while this is drying, I have put 2 zip ties then just to hold this battery plate and the speed controller. So this will hold everything in place, even a Velcro strip then to hold the battery. Then it's time to use these included screws to mount the servos to the plywood plates, the servo mount. Same thing then on the other servos. Then we come to the rear stabilizer, so you have to widen the gap and put this one in. And you're not supposed to glue this piece in quite yet, because you have to line the rear stabilizer to the wing so that all the angles are straight. You have to put it in a little bit more just to have the elevated piece moving freely. So that I think that does the trick. And then you have the rudder piece. So this one is glued in place just to make sure that it's straight. Use some CA glue. And put this on and make sure that it's really straight. And I opted to do hot glue on each side, just because I think hot glue is a really good way to make things stick quickly. On the main wing then you have these rather thin spars. There's one on the underside and there's one on the top side. You put these in and then you glue them together. So just do this on one side first. So I'm using CA glue once more. Now that the landing gear wooden piece then is dry, I can put this one in place while the wing dries. So putting some CA glue on this piece then. And putting it into this groove just all the way in. And to top it off, I use some CA glue just to make sure that this one will stay in place. So you can see the slot then where the landing gears goes. And to reinforce it, I'm just doing this all the way around the edge as well, just to make sure that this one won't come loose. And the same thing then on the other side. Now it's time to mount the wing. So one side is dry, just put this one in and then align the other wing half as well. And you should not glue these pieces together yet, just make sure that when you shove them in, that the distance on each side between the wing and the rear stabilizer then is the same. Then you will have a square RC airplane. And when you're all done with this, it's time to glue the wing and the stabilizer. So I opted just to use some hot glue on each side, as I think this is a really easy way to do it. And you get it to stick right away. Same thing then on the rear stabilizer on each side. You can surely use CA glue if you want to also. As far as the landing gears, now it's put in place and I just use this wooden piece and have some CA glue and then I top it off with some hot glue just to keep it in place. So I think with doing like this, I can actually just remove this wooden piece if I want to remove the landing gears. As far as the receiver, there's a place for it and I use hot glue to mount the receiver both underneath and then on the side to have it stay put. Then you have the servo arms then. Just screw them in place. and then comes the linkage. So I'm using this hole right now just for starters. And then you have these control horns, so you have to assemble these and glue them in place. And then use a 1.5mm hex driver to secure them. Once you have lined the control surfaces then and center the servo. And all of these control horns, they have to be put in place inside of the foam and use glue to keep them in place. We're getting near the end, so the only thing left to assemble is the prop. And you should do this after you have set up your TX, just to make sure that you don't hit yourself with the prop during the TX process setup then. So there is the prop, there is a washer, and then you use a wrench to secure the prop. So I mean, it takes a few hours to assemble this RC airplane. You have to wait for the glue to dry. And without instruction manuals, it takes a little bit longer time also. It's a rather complicated build on this RC airplane. I mean, it's also a rather cheap RC airplane. You purchase this one with a kit, and when you actually have everything from the motor, the speed controller, so you have to just provide your own receiver and transmitter and battery. But there are just many steps to assemble this RC airplane. So if you're a beginner, I think you will really struggle. If you're used to putting RC airplanes together, I think you might spend like 5 hours to get this one together. So I mean, if I've assembled this one in the right way, it will hopefully fly good. So let's go outside and get this Sbach 342 up in the air. This is the second flight of this Sbach 342 from Skynetic or Motion RC. And the thing is, when I got this up in the air the first time, I discovered that it's a super rock solid RC airplane. I cannot even compare this one, for instance, to the E-flite erratics, because this plane is so much more steady. It more or less flies like a 1.2 or 1.3 RC airplane. I don't know why, because I mean, it shouldn't really fly that much different than compared to the erratics, as they are very similar in size and weight. But this one, I mean, it's a super rock solid. And when you build an RC airplane, then like a kit form, there are a lot of assembly steps. So sure, you can put your RC airplane together in the wrong way, and you have a bad flying RC airplane. But just looking at how this one flies, I think I did everything right. And truly, it's a really nice RC airplane. The prop on this RC airplane then is a kind of a slow flying RC airplane prop, so slow flyer. So it's not a speedy RC airplane, but it surely is able and super really gentle when I fly this RC airplane. I mean, there are no surprises, which then, if I compare to the E-flite erratics, I do have with the erratics, but this one is just super rock solid. I would compare this one then to the Multiplex Extra 300S at 1.2 meter, because it flies just as nice as the Multiplex RC airplane. Now, I don't think this is a beautiful one. When you hold it up close, it surely does have its kind of a beauty flaws, but in the air, I think it looks nice. And I also much more prefer to have this steel landing gear legs than instead of the carbon fiber that it's on the erratic. So this plane just overall feels much more sturdy. So that's maybe why it also flies much more solid. So I mean, I have to explore this plane more times, but as of now, I'm really pleased with how it flies. I set a timer for 5 minutes on a 1300 3S battery. And I think you can, if you fly it like this, I think you can probably do like 6 minutes of flight time. It's just, I mean, there is a little bit of wind today, not much, but still it's just super steady. So I think I probably could increase throw on then the horns on this RC airplane to have it even more agile, but just out of the box, just with the stock setting on this RC airplane, it is really well controlled. And I kind of like these aerobatics, you don't fly too fast. And I'm just exploring this one, so I have no good aerobatic routine right now. I'm just trying to to get the feel for this RC airplane. And I really don't want to go out on the ice. I know that it is thick enough to walk on, but I'm always a little bit scared just to walk on the ice when there have been a couple of plus degrees days. The noise is more or less just from the motor, so I don't have any really bad prop sound from this RC airplane as of now. It does appear to be a good balanced prop. I do fly mine then on 100% rate with a 30% expo. Time's almost up. So I have the slightest breeze just coming from my right side. So this is like the direction I will land in. Just yeah, that's my 30-second mark then. So let's just reduce altitude and speed. Get this one down, hopefully in a good way. Really nicely flying RC airplane, this Skynetic. I was really pleasantly surprised by how this RC airplane flies. And just to compare them to the erratics, this one flies so much better because it's just so well controlled. I don't know why really, because they are kind of similar in size. So maybe because this is a really solid RC airplane, and in my opinion the erratic is a kind of a flimsy RC airplane. Or maybe it is because it's a little bit longer, I don't know, but it surely is a great flying RC airplane. And I didn't experience that this one was over controlled in any way. I mean, I suppose I could increase throw on some surfaces and have it even more agile. Then again, I really like RC airplanes that are well controlled, and I have no urge just to go crazy and do fumble rolls or just snap rolls all the time. And this plane will surely do everything you want it to do. It does also really have a really nice prop sound. So this prop is kind of a steep pitch, so it's more of a slow flying prop on this RC airplane. So don't expect this one to be speedy. And I think that this one has been around for a really long time. I mean, I wouldn't say that the construction on this RC airplane is too great, because there are a lot of steps and you have to use glue to assemble more or less everything on this RC airplane. But once it's assembled, I think it does feel really solid. There are no hinges in the control surfaces, so hopefully they won't break as they have done on my erratics then. I think when you mount the battery, it's a really tight fit for the 1300 milliamp battery I choose for this RC airplane. But then again, they stay in place, so that's a really good thing. this plane does feature an XT60, and with an XT60 I have no XT60 batteries, but you could easily plug in an EC3 connector, or like on the Spektrum batteries, then you have the IC3 with just a little bit of force. You can plug it in, so you don't have to change this connector. The speed control, as I said, is 30 amp, so it's more than on the erratics, but still I think that the erratics is a little bit more speedy RC plane than what this RC plane is. So I mean, once you get this one up in the air in flight, I think you will be just pleasantly surprised by how well behaved this RC plane. And I also dig that on the underside you have a more dark gray color, and you have these stripes. Orientation is super great. You just to compare to this overside end, which is more white, and this one which is gray. You have, I mean, a really good way to orientate this RC plane. I think the landing gears handle really well. And the thing is, with these aerobatic RC planes, you don't have to land them as a usual RC plane. You can more or less just hover them and ease in and just drop the throttle, and they will just plop down really good. So, I mean, a really nice and interesting experience for me, at least, to build this RC plane, and just like a scratch build almost. Just to experience this great flying Skynetic Sbach then. I think it's just a fantastic RC plane, not really beautiful, but fun and fantastic when it flies.